to learn Bhagavad Gita. We'll get started. Om. 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 Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Vridavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusantathami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshini. Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Fullaravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajwalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetam Brudaduhe Namaha. Sarvopanishado Gava Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyaha Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. So we are on the chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita called Arjuna Vishada Yoga, or Yoga of Arjuna's despondency or Arjuna's grief. We saw the breakup of the entire chapter last week, and I thought we can just use that as a review for today. From shlokas 1 to about the 20th shloka, we saw that the stage is being set up for the teaching to be imparted to Arjuna by Sri Krishna. The shlokas that we saw were essentially the connection of Mahabharata itself to the teaching. So then we saw what are the circumstances in which the teaching was imparted to Arjuna, and with Arjuna being a nimitta, we all are benefited from that teaching. So we saw this very confident Arjuna who was prepared for the war. He was prepared until he saw the army on both sides. That was his true test. All that he has been prepared for, his mind, his body, senses, prana, everything then just went for a toss. And it went for a toss into an extreme state of Vishada or grief. And we saw this up to about shloka 27, about 27.5. Senayo rubayor madhye ratham stapayam mechuta. When he asks Lord Krishna to set the chariot right in the middle of the two armies. And then when Lord Krishna did do as Arjuna wanted, then what happened? We see Arjuna then undergoing this extreme psychological problem or psychological hysteria. So in that shlokas almost 27 to 37, we see the psychological problem where he sees how it affects his body, it affects his mind. And then from his mind, he goes into a delusory state. So up till then, he is just talking, right? And then from Shloka 38, he starts to talk about Kula Dharma, Varna Dharma, Sankara Praja, all these which will become responsible for future calamities, future problems. And then also saying how in future, if we don't do anything about it, how everyone would, experience naraka and would not get the proper prapti that they need. So then, all this put together, he wants to finally say that we should not fight this war. This war is not justified. So we see the key shloka of the third part of this chapter, which says, Tasma narha vayam hantum dhartarashtran svabhandavan swajanam hi katham hatva sukhina syama madhava. So this was the topic where he says, Vayam dhartarashtran hantum na arhaha. We should not kill these people. Why? Well, they are our swabhandavan. Swabhandavan, meaning that they are our own kith and kin. They are my relations. And this is actually the start for that next section where he starts talking about his family, and from the family all the way into the kula, which means the lineage. So he says, they're all our swajanam. So by killing my people, katham sukhinaha shyama, how can we enjoy a happy life? So he's trying to say indirectly that happiness is more important and not dharma. Here he has come to fulfill his dharma, but suddenly you see the whole thing being turned, and suddenly it seems like happiness is more important and how he wants to enjoy this happy life. So he's willing to sacrifice dharma for the sake of happiness. This is an indirect conclusion, of course, of Arjuna. But he continues to say that happiness comes only when one shares things with one's people and not by killing them. So how can we be happy then? He's justifying not just killing them, saying they are my family, they are my kula and lineage. And if you just try to argue with Arjuna at this point, saying that, well, the Kauravas don't have problem in killing you, why do you have a problem, O Arjuna, in killing them? He says, well, the Kauravas are overpowered with greed and they just want help. They just want the wealth and they are not able to see. But we are more intelligent and we can actually see what is going to happen. So all this he starts to say in the next shloka. And then not just relatives, not just family, but also all the people who have come to support both the armies. Arjuna argues, saying that even they would not be spared in all this. It's literally a friend going against a friend, a brother going against a brother. All this is extreme droha. We cannot allow this. So he starts to bring up all these aspects of family and then community. And he starts to explain about how when this happens, this is not going to be healthy for anybody. And all this is something we have to avoid. So we see that just for the sake of the land, this whole issue has cropped up and this entire war has happened. So just to give you a perspective, a difference between how Mahabharata is versus Ramayana in this relation of land dispute. The difference is that in Ramayana also there was this aspect of the land and kingdom, right? That's what Kaikeyi wanted for her son Bharata. But in Ramayana, you see that Bharata wants to give the kingdom to Rama. He doesn't want to have anything to do with it. But in Mahabharata, you see that both actually want the kingdom. And therefore, there is a conflict between the brothers in Mahabharata, whereas in Ramayana, there is love and beautiful friendship between the brothers. I just thought I'll bring that aspect since we are in this aspect of talking about family and talking about families on how the conflicts are seen in this war here. So we see that this shloka 37, up to this, we saw the psychological state of Arjuna. And from here on, keeping in mind this aspect of family and lineage and culture and traditions, how all these also are going to be affected by the war, you see Arjuna talking about this in the next shloka. You see, he says, Yadyapyete na pashyanti, lobo pahata chetasaha, kulakshaya kritam dosham, mitra drohecha patakam. So this is Arjuna's justification. He's trying to tell Krishna, all this time, I thought, we were confused. But no, I see some light here. I'm not confused at all. In fact, I'm seeing some vision. I'm finally convinced that all this war is really something we should not get into. So you can see how Arjuna is trying to justify his actions. In the beginning, he was so pumped up about getting into this war and trying to justify the right for his own kingdom, for Indraprastha, everything. But now his tables are turned and he says, I'm having a much better vision. So he is, and he tries to say that Yatyapi etana pashyanti, even though they do not see, we see that the Kauravas, because of their own greed, lobha upahata chetasaha, their minds being clouded by greed, they don't mind causing all this destruction to the families. Kulakshaya kritam dosham. They don't mind really incurring the sin of it, and even including mitra drohecha patakam. And not only that, even the evil for the friends. But we, on the other hand, we should turn away from this sin. Why should we not do this? Katam nagneyam asma bihi papat asman nivartitum. Why can't we run away from this sin? And so, because we actually see this, so we should not allow this to happen. We should just run away from here. And it is better to do that. We should not have this false ego at all. So what if others are going to criticize us? It is their problem, but we should not allow this to happen. So you see how his justification is changing. After trying the other way, now he's trying to tell Krishna that this is what we need to do. From this, we have to escape. We cannot allow all the sins to overtake us. And all this time, you see Krishna still being very quiet. You see, Arjuna is trying to tell Krishna about all this as if Lord Krishna didn't know anything at all. So it's like this, just a small joke. A father and a son, one Friday night, decided this, every Friday night, this father was noticing that the son usually goes out late in the night and he comes much, much later, and he never gets to have a nice heart-to-heart father and son talk. But one Friday evening, the father saw the son at home. So he thought, okay, I need to have a chat with him and, basically talk to him about life and everything. So he says, son, why don't you come over? Let's talk about life. So the son says, okay, father, ask me, what do you want to know about life? So you see, the son thinks that he has all the answers. So this is how Arjuna was talking to Lord Krishna, as if he knew everything and as if he can actually get away from fighting this war. So then in 40, we see, I don't think we chanted the shloka. I will chant this anyway. Kulakshaye pranashyanti, Kulakshaye pranashyanti, Kuladharma sanatanaha, Kuladharma sanatanaha, Dharme nashte kulam kritsnam, Dharme nashte kulam kritsnam, Adharmo bhibhavatyutam, Adharmo bhibhavatyutam. So kulakshaye pranashyanti. Kula, which is here referring to the family or the lineage, owing to the destruction of the family, will perish the immemorial religious rights of that family. So, after having explained about the fact that he doesn't want to kill people on both sides, on the family sides, he's now trying to bring the justification even more deeper to Lord Krishna by saying that if we were to destroy the family, that's going to destroy the traditional religious rites which are performed over ages and over through generations. And then what will happen? From destruction of this religiosity or the aspect of the tradition of doing the religious rites, then the entire family will be overcome by impiety. Impiety, or he's saying that we will be subjected to adharma. So Arjuna is now explaining the consequences here of what will happen if we destroy families. And if there are no healthy families in a society, you can see that that will lead to literally a breakup of the communities itself. So Arjuna wants to say that without family life, dharma can never grow, which is, implying that if we were to destroy the families, the religious rights will be destroyed. And if there are no religious rights, then how can dharma really survive? And if there is no dharma, what will happen? We are not going to have the proper foundations of religion, which is needed in order for the culture to grow. And if culture doesn't grow, then how can we ever have spiritual leanings? How can we have a strong hold on spirituality itself? So therefore, whether it is dharma or whether it's culture, all these things can grow only in a society where there are stable, surviving, long-lasting families. And how does that translate to us in today's world? We see that in our own modern society, a lot of the family things are breaking down, and we see the consequences of that too. When there is a breakdown of the family values, or when there's a breakdown in a strong lineages, then we see that the value system also suffers. The traditional values that are passed on through generations in various families, all that gets also broken or dissolved. It's also sometimes you look at this tradition, which sometimes is necessary in not just families, but also in, for example, in the maintenance of corporations. Um, Having worked for a company, a German company, I could say that there are companies which lasted for 150, 200 years. They have their core businesses so strong that they can lead, that can help them have their product portfolios also stay longer. And you can see this strength in holding on to this lineage of different things, even in, say, governments or any other organizations which last for a long time. So it is not just in families, but you see the strengthening of the lineage, strengthening of the corporations. All this depends upon strong foundations. So indirectly, what Arjuna is trying to say is trying to bring this as an argument to Lord Krishna, saying how families will be destroyed, and due to that, traditions will be destroyed by having this. And that is what he's referring to as kulakshaye. Kshaye means decay, or that can happen to families. And from that, also dharma, the values will be lost. So, and moving on, he's saying about what will happen further. What else will be the consequences? What are the other aspects of this that can get destroyed? So let us see that. He says, adharmabhivavat Krishna, adharmabhivavat Krishna, pradushyanti kulastriyah, pradushyanti kulastriyah, strishu dushtasu vashneya, strishu dushtasu vashneya, jayate varna sankaraha, jayate varna sankaraha. So from this aspect of adharma, O Krishna, adharma abhibhavat Krishna, from this prevalence of adharma, what else can happen? Well, the women of the family, pradushyanti kulastriyaha, the women of the family can become corrupt. We will see in detail on exactly what he's trying to mean here. And then further on, strishu dushtasu vashneya. And with women becoming corrupt, O Vashneya, referring to Lord Krishna of the Vrishni clan, again, you can see the name of Lord Krishna being chosen as Vashneya because of the clan. So indicating this indirectly how the necessity for propagating the clan itself. Then what will happen? Jayate Varna Sankaraha. Varna indicating the caste system. Sankaraha meaning intermingling or the mix-up of the castes. So, in a sense, what he's trying to say is that whatever traditions that are being followed will not be kept, because in this war, you're going to have all the men being killed. Because as we know, in the war, it was only the men who were the warriors. The women stayed home. So if the men were going to be killed, if all the men go to the war, and if they've been practicing all these traditions of maintaining the culture, and in many families where the men also officiate more as the priests of the house, saying all the mantras, and then the women help the families with helping the male do the rites. In all this, if the men were to go to the war and if they have been practicing these things, then because of their death, all these traditions will disappear. And then what will happen? The women folks will become helpless in the sense, because the men were supposed to do this and they are not there anymore, and they are not there to protect the women also, then later, the women are left to their own. And if that happens, then all the responsibilities of the house cannot be handled by just this one person. As women have their own responsibility of taking care of the children, then who's going to take care of everything? And by doing so, then women become helpless, and later generations will not know what practices have to be performed and to what lineage they belong to. So, in this case, in this way, what is going to happen is the kula is going to be destroyed. So, kula kshaye pranashyanti kula dharma sanatanaha. And when that dharma is also nashta or destroyed, then this entire kula will be gone, because adharma is prevailing. So adharma abhibhavat, when adharma overpowers the kula dharma, then he's saying, hey Krishna, hey Vashneya, which is Vrishi Gotra Udbhavaha, because we are talking about Kula Dharma, Kula Gotra here. He says there will be so much of confusion, and this itself will be a great dosha, and this is not to be allowed, because men will be fewer in number, and practices which were done by men, they will not be followed. Women will be more in number, so all young men will end up dying in the war. So either there will be a lot of old men and children, and women will not be protected. So for this reason also, we should really reconsider whether we want to have this war. And further on, he starts to say, Sankaro narakayaiva, Sankaro narakayaiva, Kulagnanam kulasya cha, Kulagnanam kulasya cha, Patanti pitaro hyesham, Patanti pitaro hyesham, Lupta pindodaka kriyaha, Lupta pindodaka kriyaha. So, continuing on, he says, Sankaro narakayaiva varna sankara praja. He says that this confusion of castes, because since there are not the men in every caste who are available for doing all the rites, there will be a confusion of castes. All castes will be intermingled. People will just marry within castes. And then what will happen, he says, it means hell for the slayers of the family. And from this, they fall into evil, and the family forefathers are deprived of the offering of the pinda. So in a sense, he's trying to say that since the lineage is destroyed, there are not enough people to do shraddha, which is one of the important karmas to be done for their forefathers and for the grandfathers and fathers, which are all part of the shraddham ceremony itself. So if that were to happen, then how would even children know what is this tradition all about? Because as we know, in our tradition, we believe that we are not really the gross body. It is actually the subtle body that goes through the various different births and deaths. So that being the case, in the Shraddha ceremony, when it is being done, children would observe this and would recognize that there is the mention of the fathers and the grandfathers. And when that kind of a tradition is kept alive, the children also recognize what the stages of life and death and everything is. So with that being said, that main important ritual, which is the essence of keeping up with the lineage, that is also lost. When that is lost, that is another big thing for the family, and therefore the family will fall into evil ways because of this. So he's again trying to justify the reason why this whole aspect of kula dharma, varna dharma, all this needs to be kept in mind. So ancestors will be neglected, and because the ancestors are neglected, there is no more cultural contact with the past itself, and this will have an effect in the progress for the future itself. And then what will happen? Because of the fact that this is also not there, he says, Doshai retai kulagnanam. Doshai retai kulagnanam. Varna sankara karakaihi. Varna sankara karakaihi. Utsadhyante jati dharmaha. Utsadhyante jati dharmaha. Kuladharmascha shashvataha. Kuladharmascha shashvataha. So now he's pointing out the effect of what happens when you destroy that whole kula, that whole lineage, by destroying that lineage in this case, and also with this mix-up of the caste system, what happens? Doshaihi etai kulagnanam varna sankara karakaihi. Utsadyante jati dharmaha. There's a destruction of the caste religious rights. So not just the family, not just the kula or the varna, but also the whole caste religious rights are also destroyed. And kula dharmascha shashvataha, as well as the age-old family religious rights. So he says, once this happens, once this confusion happens, then not only this, even the professions can get lost. So in the olden days, we had definitely families after families who became specialized in many different arts. So even now in India, we have certain villages who are specialists in certain art. For example, there would be one particular village would be really specialized in, say, even threading gold into fine threads, which then is used to making the beautiful dresses for the deities, for example. So there are still some families who are specialized in specific professions. So what Arjuna is trying to point out is that here now you're going to have not just that, but entire professionals will be lost. So if that happens, then people will be forced to study some other professions in which they may not be good at. And if they're not good in that, then it's going to lead to the value system being lost as well, because everyone is going to look at only money as a reason for earning, and they're not going to pay attention to their own skill set and everything and all that. So that is going to lead to an entire society breakdown even in that regard. So again, another aspect, you can see how Arjuna's mind is thinking, and he's trying to justify each and every aspect of how he doesn't want to fight this war. And then continuing on, he says, Utsanna kula dharmanam, Utsanna kula dharmanam, Manushyanam janardhana, Manushyanam janardhana, Narake niyatam vasaha, Narake niyatam vasaha, Bhavatityanushruma, bhavati tyanushruma. So utsanna kula dharmanam manushyam. Hey Janardhana, of those people whose kula dharma have been destroyed, of such people, narake niyatam vasaha bhavati iti shushruma. So I have heard, iti shushruma, so I've heard that they will stay in naraka for a long time. Niyata means for a regulated or defined period, and aniyata means undefined. So he's trying to say that with all these things going on, there is no way that we can ever live joyfully. People are going to be in hell. So because of all these reasons, oh Bhagwan is, he's saying there is just no way we can allow this to happen. For all these reasons, we should not fight. But then Lord Krishna must be thinking in his mind, it's all for those reasons is why you should fight, because these people have done evil. So why would you want such people to live? So Arjuna, here I am looking at dharma samstapana, and you, on the other hand, are looking to not do anything about it. So Lord Krishna is having different goals than what Arjuna has, right? So we see that how, the whole idea of Bhagavad Gita is trying to see how dharma can be established and how the right thing can be done, can be taught. But clearly Arjuna is not seeing that. So this, so we find that this is one way in which Arjuna tries to justify everything. And continuing on, finally, I think Arjuna has almost come to the end of his justifications. He doesn't have anything more that he can say. He feels he has given enough arguments to Sri Krishna, and then he is almost holding his head and he is saying, Aho balamat mahat papam, aho batamahat papam, aho batamat mahat papam, kartum vyavasita vayam, yadrichya sukhalobhena, yadrajya sukhalobhena, hantum swajana mudhyataha, aho batamahat papam, kartum vyavasita vayam, yadrajya sukhalobhena, hantum swajana mudhyataha. Aho, alas, batamahat papam, vyavastam vayam, not only me, but also Dharmaraja, Yudhishthira, Bhima, all of them. Here we have gathered for great sins, mahat papam. So we have created this great resolve to fight. This itself is a great, really a great problem here, he says. So what is that great papam? That because of this Rajya Sukha Lobha, he says, we are doing all this because of this greed. Out of greed for the pleasure of a kingdom, we are prepared to kill our kinsmen. Swajanam hantum udyataha. So he says that this is really too much. How can we allow our own greed for the pleasures of a kingdom rule this way to kill all these people. So what a pity, Ahob, he says. And because of this greed, we should not be doing this, even if it is something that they have done completely evil. It is something that we cannot allow this to happen. Again, showing Arjuna's delusion here, where he cannot, as it is truly against his dharma, to say about this itself. So finally, we see that he says, Yadi mam pratikaramashastram Yadi mam apratikaram ashastram shastrapanayah ashastram shastrapanayah Yadi mam apratikaram ashastram shastrapanayah dhartarashtrarane hanyuhu Dhartarashtrarane hanyuhu tanme kshemataram bhavet tanme kshemataram bhavet yadi mam apratikaram ashastram shastrapanayah dhartarashtrarane hanyuhu tanme kshemataram bhavet. So he is concluding his justifications by saying, Yadi mam apratikaram ashastram. Me, who's the one who is without weapons and who is not going to resist. To whom? To Dhartarashtraha Shastrapanayah. To those who are associated with Dhritarashtra along with his weapons. I mean, Dhritarashtra's sons, the Dhritarashtra who is Dhritarashtra's sons. So he says, okay, I'm going to remain unresisting and unarmed. Then they, even with Yadi Rane Hanyuhu, if they want to kill me in this battle, Tanme Kshemataram Bhavet. It'll be so good for me. Imagine Arjuna, who's again saying that one who wanted to kill everyone in the battle now is completely devastated, completely surrendering, I guess, and saying that he doesn't mind being killed by them. Let Dhritarashtra's sons slay me in this battle. Indeed, that would be preferable for me. So he is almost at the end of his rope. You can see that. So this happens when we can't think properly. Then such kind of ideas really come into these heads. Where he says, I would rather die than do this. As if by dying, all these problems can really be taken care of, right? It doesn't happen that way. We know that prarabdha karma is what it is. It will always follow us no matter where we go, right? Death really doesn't solve anything at all, because our prarabdha karma, our punya papa account will always is there to above our heads, taking care of things. Pretty soon, another body will definitely be given to us, and then you'll have to still face the issues that we start in our lifetime. So he says, if I don't fight, then it is kshemataram. Kshemataram, because first of all, the kulanasha dosha he will not incur the dosha or the sin of kula, of losing his family. Then because of the kulanasha dosha, then he will not really go to Naraka. He will not go to hell. And then also any other kind of papa, none of them he's going to incur. So with that, he feels that his thing is, he is all justified. He says, Yadi, in case mam me apratikaram, without taking up the weapon, ashastram, without any weapon in hand, and without fighting against any with shastra panayaha, if they were to kill him with a weapon, he would rather submit to it than fight the war. And he thinks that that is really much, much nobler to him, being unarmed and without a fight, giving on to these people. And he feels that this is his moral responsibility. So with that, he finishes his justification and he stops speaking. And all this time, Krishna also has not said a single word in between. And because Krishna feels that there is really no point in talking to somebody like this when they are in such a state of mind, not yet ready to talk. So let him finish whatever he wants to say. And so he keeps quiet. And so this prompts our Sanjaya to say something. So he comes in there and he says to the one whose mind, who's totally drenched with grief, which is Eva Muktvarjuna Sankhe, Eva Muktvarjuna Sankhe, Rathopasta Upavishat, Rathopasta Upavishat, Visrajya Sasharam Chapam, Visrajya Sasharam Chapam, Shoka Samvignam Manasaha, Shoka Samvigna Manasaha, Visrajya Sasharam Chapam, Shoka Samvigna Manasaha. So Sanjaya says that Arjuna, evam uktva, having thus spoken in the middle of the battlefield, evam uktva Arjuna Sankhe, rathopasta upavishat. Arjuna finally just sat down on the seat of his chariot, casting away his bow and his arrows. Visrujya Sasharam Chapam, he just casts away his bow and arrow. And then Shoka Samvigna Manasaha. He was just completely filled with shokam and in his mind, and he just sits down. So that Arjuna, who had once upon a time, not too long ago, only about 25 shlokas ago, who stood up and who wanted to see both sides of the army and wanted to see who was there with his Gandiva bow in hand, now just drops that bow. So just gives an idea as to how one strong, even a person who was as strong as Arjuna and who was all prepared all these years of training to handle the situation, decides that he himself has to give up. So Krishna still doesn't talk because Arjuna is yet not there to listen to his teaching. He is not yet become the student, and so Krishna is still not saying anything at all. And while Arjuna says that I can't fight, I will not fight. And he sits down. That brings to the end of this first chapter. And this first chapter, like, I know there's not enough time today to give an overview of the whole thing. So what I'm going to do is next week we will chant the entire first chapter. We will chant the whole thing. I will put up all the shlokas here one after the other, and we will go through one at a time or chant all the 47 shlokas here. And we will also look at it from a point of view of an overview of what we have gathered so far about Arjuna's condition and how does that translate to the challenges that we all face also. When do we go through this Arjuna Vishada Yoga? What does that mean to us? So we will see that as well next week. But in the meantime, we will do the last shloka of this chapter, which is the Sankalpa Vakya. It's called the Sankalpa Vakya. And I will explain this last shloka also, because it's very beautiful in its meaning. It says, Om Tat Saditi, Om Tat Saditi, Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su, Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su, Upanishadsu, Brahma Vidyayam, Yoga Shastre, Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade, Arjuna Vishada Yogo Nama, Prathamodhyayaha. So what does it mean? So as I said, it is called as Sankalpa Vakyam. The three words which you see in the beginning, Om, Tat, Sat. All these three words, Om, Tat, Sat, it refers to that absolute Brahman. And this is, the meaning for this is beautifully given by Sri Madhusudan Saraswati ji, the same author of the Gita Dhyanam. And Om, the meaning of Om Tat Sat, we will be seeing it when we do the 17th chapter. In the 17th chapter, there's a very beautiful shloka on this one. So where we will see more deeper the meaning of Om Tat Sat itself. But so these are the words for Brahma. Then Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su. So Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su, it's actually plural, which is, it's in plural form or Bahuvachan, as we say in Sanskrit. It means it's out of reverence, and it is an Upanishad. So Upanishad Su, that means this, every chapter in this 18th chapter is considered as an Upanishad after the first chapter. Of course, the first chapter is just a setting for the stage, but all the other 17 chapters are considered as an Upanishad by itself. So therefore, Gita is called as an Upanishad. And this particular chapter is also actually called as Ashoka Upanishad, because the problem is Shoka. So that which takes you out of Shoka is an Upanishad, and therefore this is an Ashoka Upanishad, Brahma Vidyayam. And so it is Brahma Vidya, again referring to the Upanishad part of it. So the main purpose of Gita is the imparting of the Brahma Vidya. So therefore you see Brahma Vidya there. And so Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade. Samvade basically means a dialogue. Now, you may say, where was really the dialogue in the first chapter, right? Well, it was a dialogue in the sense you had Lord Krishna speak this one word in the shloka where he said, where he said, look at the Kaurava army in front of you, right? So he said that, and so, but then Lord Krishna was following him with his mind and was basically not saying anything. But not saying anything doesn't also means that you're participating, because sometimes in a dialogue, one doesn't have to say all the time, one doesn't have to be talking all the time. But this is the first chapter. This chapter is the one in which Arjuna really conveys the maximum number of talking. He does a maximum number of talking here in this first chapter. And so that is Brahma Vidyam. Then it is a Yoga Shastra. So what is Shastra? Shastra, the etymology for this one is Shasti Hitam Upadishati. And a second definition for this one is Shasanat Shastram. Shasanam means governance. Ruling, for example, ruling is called Shasanam. So that which gives us governance or instructions on do's and don'ts, and also which is Hitam Upadishati, which is actually good for me, which is good for my Hitam. That is also a Shastra. So this will indicate in what lies really my own good. So whether I want it or not, it will tell me really what I need to really hear on where I can use the knowledge to solve my own crisis in my life. And that is why it is called as a Shastra. And it is a Vedanta, it is Vedanta Shastra. It gives the right advice. And so that is what this one is. And the ultimate knowledge, the ultimate gain for us from Bhagavad Gita is, like the Upanishad, it takes us to moksha. And as we go to the next chapters, we will be discussing more on the purpose, as well as how Bhagavad Gita gives us an opportunity to develop our own chitta shuddhi, which is needed in order for us to get the jnanam, which takes us to moksha. So all this will be explained as we move on from every chapter to another. So with that, we will complete here. Our next lecture is on the 10th. And on that day, we will make a start with the second chapter as well. But as I mentioned before that, we will chant the entire 47 shlokas of the first chapter. And we will also have an overview. We'll spend about 15-20 minutes on completing the whole saram of the first chapter itself, and see what we have learned from this. And if you have any questions, please do feel free to send me a text or an email. And by next week, my plan is also to put together the notes for each one of these shlokas. And I can share that during the presentation as well. And I will also put that in the Google Drive. So in there, I'm going to put many of the points which probably I didn't get a chance to share, or also taking the most important points of the shloka, which I want to put for each one of them, and that will also be available. So with that, we will conclude. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Shanti.
Harihi Om.
Harihi Om.